Willkommen Freunde, und heute Tag wir werden etwas bayerisches Bier trinken. Hofbräu. Gehen wir. Okay guys, so yeah, we're gonna be drinking some beer from Hofbrau brewery. If you can't guess, it's German. So yeah, let's go. Like many European breweries, the history of Hofbrau goes back several hundred years, in this case to 1589, when the Duke of Bavaria, Wilhelm V, decided to found a brewery for the rulers of Bavaria, who were originally dukes and then later kings. You actually can see this in the name Hofbrau. Hof meaning court, as in the king's court, and Brau meaning beer, so as in the court's brew. It's the guys who brew beer for the king. And also a quick aside, but until German unification in 1871, Bavaria was really, like most all other parts of Germany, its own independent state for hundreds of years. Well, I guess except for Prussia or the Prussians, since they were the ones who were kind of doing all of the unifying, but anyway, Bavaria continued to hold official kingdom status in the German Empire all the way up until the end of World War I, when the empire was dissolved. Hofbrau, I understand in German, is pronounced something like Hofbräu, which was something that a couple of my German friends corrected me on when we were having a couple of Hofbraus during a Deutsche Bank training program in New York City a few years back. But I'm going to go with Hofbrau just because it's going to be a little easier for me to say continuously. So, Entschuldigen Sie, sorry Germans, I'm going with Hofbrau. Alright, so the brewery started in the 1500s, but here's the thing, the beer and the beer hall really go together, kind of like a package deal.
Santa and a reindeer, it's kind of a package deal.
The original Hofbräuhaus am Platzl was basically the first beer garden built where they could go and kick back with a nice beer or two, or a liter or two of beer, or however much beer they wanted to drink. Officially known as the Staatliches Hofbräuhaus in München, or Royal Public Brewery in Munich, the beer brewed here was primarily made in accordance with the 1516 Reinheitsgebot, or beer purity law, which was created in Bavaria and stated that beer could only be made from water, barley, and hops. And yeast, when people figured out that was kind of a separate thing. It's a little bit more complicated than that because technically things like wheat were supposed to be off the table, but wheat was still very extensively used in a lot of beer, especially Hofbrau beer. So this beer actually became very popular quickly and was very famous very soon throughout a lot of Bavaria, and was of such fame that apparently during the 30 Years' War, which I will not get into, the beer apparently saved the city of Munich. So Munich was being besieged at one point by Swedish forces led by the famed warrior king Gustavus Adolphus, who threatened to burn the city, until he was paid off by the townsfolk with a bribe of allegedly 600,000 barrels of high-strength Maybach Hofbrau beer, which is a lot of beer. And I've just got to imagine, like, how many wagons would you need to transport 600,000 barrels of beer? And then how many horses would you need to pull those wagons? I mean, even if it was just a fraction of that, that's still a lot of beer. I mean, the army logistics for that would have been insane. Anyway, now backing up a little bit, the original beer was apparently a brown beer, or brown beer, which was created first by Wilhelm V, but then the ruler after him, Maximilian, focused a bit more on wheat beers, or Weissbier or Weizenbier. And then of course there was the Maybach, which I just discussed, and then starting in the 1800s, once lagers really became a thing, Hofbrau produced that in tremendous quantity. Ironically, it was actually after World War II when Hofbrau started becoming more of a sort of globally recognized beer brand. Following Germany's defeat in World War II, American GIs would visit the Hofbrau house and come back with the mugs that had the characteristic HB on the front, and that sort of helped promote the brand in some ways around the world. Hofbrau opened its first non-German beer garden in Genoa, Italy in the 1950s, and then in 1968 opened the first beer garden outside of Europe, in Melbourne, Australia of all places. And from there, the beer continued to expand in popularity. Now interestingly, Hofbrau is still actually a state-run enterprise, as in it's officially owned by the Bavarian government, which makes it pretty unique for a brewery. You can find Hofbrau in 41 countries around the world. That's in grocery stores and restaurants. But one other interesting fact is that Hofbrau, or rather the Bavarian government, has a number of Hofbräuhäuser, or Hofbrau houses, located around the world where you can actually go in and have a sit-down experience. These Hofbrau houses are located in 38 countries around the world, and unsurprisingly, they're primarily found in Germany, Austria, and the United States. There's one in New York City, which I've actually been to a couple times, and then there are another 6 in the greater Midwest. Think Pittsburgh, Ohio, Chicago, St. Louis, things like that, which really makes sense if you think about it, given where Germans historically settled in the United States. And then there's Florida. 3 locations all to themselves. So at these establishments, of course, you can get a sit-down experience with not just German beer, but also German classics like bratwurst and pretzels. And I don't know about you, but going to a beer garden with friends, having good conversation, great German beer, and some sauerkraut, bratwurst, pretzels, and meat is a pretty great way to spend a Saturday afternoon. First up, we have the Hofbrau Original. This is really just what you think of when you picture a bunch of German people with big 1-liter Bavarian-style Maß glasses, or half-liter glasses, as I prefer to drink them. Again, I'm not exactly the biggest guy in the world. As befitting a classic German lager, this is going to be reasonably malty, have a bit of a body, and I'm expecting an exceptionally clean and crisp finish. Hofbrau Dunkel. This is a dark beer that's going to have a much more roasted malty flavor, along with a hint of sweetness. This is also the kind of beer that, as I've sort of implied, if you were to go back in time more than about a couple hundred years, it's sort of a similar style that you might have at a Hofbrau house in the 15, 16, 1700s. Hofbrau Hefeweizen. This is, as I mentioned, one of the earlier beers produced by the brewery. And it's a wheat ale, so it's going to have, aside from some malt, a medium to heavy body with some notes of honey, as well as notes of what apparently have been described as banana. We shall see. So, let's try some Hofbrau beers, shall we? Now, first up, we have the Hofbrau Original. Got a nice frothy head on that. Looks rather golden, a little paler yellow, slightly more pale yellow, like a straw yellow, rather than sort of a deep golden color. Yep, smells very crisp. Yeah, nice. It has that sort of the clean, crisp feeling I associate with German lagers in particular. Not particularly overly malty or overly hoppy, but quite well balanced, pretty understated, but it just feels like clean, crisp, enjoyable beer that you can, drink a bit of. It's not super complicated, there's not a lot to think about, but it's just got a little bit more sort of interesting character than sort of generic beer flavor. Tiny little bite to it from the hops, but it's got a good body. And then yeah, a little bit of it's not sour, but there's just a little bit of that, crisp ending note to the beer, which makes it quite refreshing. That's sort of how I describe it. So yeah, overall, good German lager. Next up, we have the Hofbrau Dunkel. Interesting. Now it's not super dark. It's more of it's an amber color. And I'm getting a little bit of, malty sweetness, toffee, caramel kind of, flavors we would expect. Yes, that has that nice sort of sweet, dark, liquid bread flavor to it that I associate with the Dunkel. It also tastes a little stronger. It's not actually that much higher in alcohol than the regular Hofbrau, which is 5.1. So it's pretty similar, but it feels a little stronger. So if you sort of enjoy that flavor, you feel like you're drinking something that's maybe 6.5 or 7% alcohol, but this is not that. This has that flavor, which is very interesting actually. Usually I feel it goes the other way. There can be beers that are quite high in alcohol, but they don't taste like they have very much alcohol in them, but this is quite the reverse. Finally, we're trying the Hefeweizen. While wheat is technically against the Reinheitsgebot, you're supposed to only have barley, water, and hops. This is indeed a wheat beer, and people brewed plenty of it, and they still do. So they were sort of all just directly in violation of that, and everyone kind of turned a blind eye. So, yes. So this smells like there's a tiny little bit of something that's not wheat, but it smells very heavy. So, yeah, call me crazy. There is something in this that I would almost classify as vaguely banana-like. Which I get that there is no banana in this, but I gotta say, there's something about this that is like a smooth, heavy fruit flavor that I can only describe as banana. That's really weird. Yeah, I'm gonna take another taste of this. Yeah, and it is definitely heavier than some Belgian wheat beers I've had. It's got that, yeah, sort of heavy wheat kind of cereal grain flavor to it, but mixed into it is a little bit of sweetness that I can only describe as banana. So very different flavor profile from a lot of other wheat beers outside of Germany that you might try. And if you prefer something that's just like it's heavy and it's strong and it almost feels like a meal in itself with a little bit of fruit on the side, or fruit mixed in rather, or mashed in or whatever, this is a very interesting beer. So in conclusion, what I think I decided was that all of these beers are definitely good in different ways. How I would personally rank them, however, is in third place, there is the Hefeweizen. Then kind of not quite in first place, but sort of in a very, very close second, I would put the Hofbrau Original. And then in first place is the Hofbrau Dunkel. Now, let me explain. I think wheat beers can be interesting, and usually if there's a little bit more sort of pep in their step, that's a plus, at least in my book. This one it's an interesting flavor profile. That heavy wheat and honestly banana flavor are interesting, but I'm not sure after more than about half a glass of that, I would want to have more of that sort of flavor profile. Now, this Hofbrau Original is just a very well-balanced lager, and in a future video when we do sort of a European lagers taste test, this is absolutely going into the finals. It's just a very, very nice, clean, crisp, well-balanced German lager with a little bit of that sort of, just clean finish. And it just feels like it's been brewed with just good water, good hops, just all of the ingredients just taste very good and fresh. But in first place, I really do have to give it to the Hofbrau Dunkel. I think this one, it's just, and you maybe know by this point, I'm a fan of dark beers. I think this one it has the nicest flavor profile. There's the most complexity to it, with just a little bit of that sweetness, and a little bit of that sort of strength to it. It does sort of have that body, even though it's amber, it's not sort of like a dark beer. It does still have sort of a good body to it, with some, sweet malt kind of mixed in there. And it's definitely something that I could have, sort of more than one of. So yeah, this is my assessment. Again, as I said, none of these are bad beers. All of them are quite enjoyable to drink. If you like your beer a little bit, heavier and wheaty, like it tastes kind of like wheat, with some banana, you're gonna like this one. If you really just want to go for the lagers, you're gonna like this one, and then if you like the dark ones, you're gonna like this one. But yes, in terms of the absolute ranking, this is what I'm going with. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think about my ranking, and I'll see you next time.